I thought I knew her story, but with every glance, every quiet moment, she rewrote everything I believed about who she was and who I could be with her. It was one of those ordinary days that somehow felt different. I was sitting at a small cafe, the kind where time seemed to slow down just enough for you to notice the little things, the soft clink of porcelain cups, the faint murmur of conversations drifting around me, and the comforting scent of fresh coffee mingling with the morning air. I wasn't expecting anything special, just a quiet moment to myself. Then she walked in. There was something about her presence that made the room shift ever so slightly. Not loud or demanding, but quietly commanding. She moved with the kind of grace that comes from years of living. Every step measured, effortless, like she belonged to a different rhythm than the bustling world around her. She was beautiful in a way that wasn't about youth or flashiness. It was a quiet confidence, a calm certainty wrapped in subtle elegance. Our eyes met briefly, and I felt the subtle charge of something unfamiliar but not uncomfortable. Her gaze held depth, like she carried stories that weren't easily told. The kind of woman who had seen the seasons change many times, who had known both joy and pain, but carried it all with a gentle dignity. There was an unexpected softness behind the strength in her eyes, a vulnerability almost hidden, yet impossible to ignore. She smiled, just the faintest curve of her lips, and when she extended her hand in greeting, I noticed the warmth beneath her touch, steady, reassuring. Her skin was soft, but her grip was firm, like the kind of woman who knew exactly what she wanted but chose to be patient. A subtle perfume lingered around her, something classic, maybe jasmine or sandalwood, understated but lingering like a memory you couldn't quite place. It wasn't overpowering. It was familiar and comforting, as if it belonged to someone who treasured quiet moments more than flashy impressions. I found myself wanting to know her, to understand the layers behind those eyes, the story she hadn't told anyone else. There was an unspoken invitation in the way she looked at me, like she saw something worth noticing, something that surprised her too. And just like that, in the midst of an ordinary day, everything I thought I knew about the kind of people I'd meet, the kind of stories I'd hear, started to blur. She made me realize how little I understood about the quiet power people carry within them. And without even trying, she made me forget everything I thought I knew about her. Because now, I was ready to learn the truth, piece by piece. After that first, unexpected meeting, life somehow seemed to arrange moments where our paths crossed again and again, almost as if the universe was gently nudging us toward each other. These were small, ordinary exchanges at first, almost insignificant on the surface, but beneath them simmered something quietly electric, a connection that neither of us could quite name, yet both felt deeply. I would see her at the corner bookstore, lingering by the poetry shelf, fingers tracing the spines of old, well-loved books. Our eyes would meet over the tops of pages, and for a heartbeat, the world narrowed to that shared glance. She never said much, just a small, knowing smile, like a secret we both carried but weren't ready to share yet. And every time, something inside me stirred, a gentle pull I couldn't ignore. One afternoon, as she handed me a borrowed book, something she insisted I read, our hands brushed ever so lightly. The touch was brief, barely a second, but the memory of that softness lingered long after. It wasn't just a touch. It was a spark, a silent promise of something unspoken. Her fingers were cool, delicate, and the faint tremble I sensed spoke of a hesitation that matched my own. It was a delicate dance of closeness without crossing invisible boundaries. I found myself watching the way she moved, the small gestures that made her who she was. The way she would tuck a loose strand of hair behind her ear, fingers lingering near her neck, as if trying to hold onto a moment of calm. The subtle way her breath hitched when a sudden noise startled her, or how her eyes would soften when she thought no one was looking. These were quiet, intimate details that told me more than words ever could. Sometimes we would sit near each other in the park, close enough that our shoulders almost touched. I could feel the warmth radiating from her, steady and reassuring. Our conversations were minimal, Mostly shared smiles and comfortable silences. But in those silences, there was an unspoken understanding growing. Every pause between us was filled with the weight of what we weren't saying, the gentle tension of something waiting to bloom. There were moments when our eyes would meet just a little too long, and my heart would race, unsure if it was hope or fear. I caught myself imagining what it would be like to reach out, to close the small distance between us, but I hesitated. It felt like walking on a thin line between what was possible and what was forbidden, between the comfort of familiarity and the thrill of the unknown. Through these small moments, I began to see her differently, not just as the woman I met that day, but as someone complex and alive with stories and emotions that only I was starting to glimpse. She made me question everything I thought I knew about connection and desire, about age and timing. And in that gentle, quiet way, she was rewriting the rules without even trying. The day we finally talked wasn't marked by fireworks or grand gestures, just a quiet shift in the rhythm between us. Until then, our connection had lived in glances and small touches, an unspoken understanding that seemed fragile and precious all at once. But that afternoon, something softened, and words began to fill the spaces between us. We found ourselves sitting side by side on a bench in the park, the late afternoon sun casting a warm glow over everything. The sounds of children playing and leaves rustling surrounded us, but there was a stillness between us, as if the world had paused just for this moment. She looked at me with a calmness that both invited and intimidated, a woman who had lived through storms and come out steady, but who also carried invisible scars. Her voice was softer than I imagined, a gentle tremor betraying the courage it took to share pieces of herself. She spoke of a life full of joy and loss, of hopes that had been reshaped by experience. She didn't ask for pity or admiration, only understanding. I listened, feeling the weight of her words settle deep inside me, the way the sunlight settled on her face, highlighting the quiet strength in her eyes. When I spoke, I tried to match her openness, revealing parts of myself I usually kept guarded, the fears of not being enough, the longing to be seen for who I truly was. Our conversation wasn't just about exchanging stories. It was a delicate dance of trust building, where every word mattered. I noticed how her fingers occasionally twined together nervously in her lap, how her breath hitched slightly when she spoke of moments she wished she could change. At one point, our hands brushed on the bench, tentative and electric. Neither of us pulled away. Instead, her fingers lingered near mine, and I felt a warmth spread through my chest that was more than just physical. It was the feeling of connection, a silent promise that this was no longer just a fleeting encounter, but something real and fragile. In that space between us, I saw vulnerability and courage intertwined. She wasn't the mysterious woman I'd admired from afar anymore. She was someone willing to risk exposing the parts of herself that most people never saw. And that made her even more beautiful in my eyes. The honest conversation shifted something inside me. It was no longer enough to simply watch her from a distance or treasure small moments of silence. I wanted to understand her, to be there not just for the good days, but the quiet struggles she carried with such grace. There was an unspoken question hanging in the air. Could we be more than just two people who met by chance? The sun dipped lower, and as the light softened, so did the tension between us. We didn't need to rush or demand answers. Just being together, sharing our truths, was enough for now. Her eyes held a new kind of warmth, one that said she was willing to see me, really see me, and perhaps in time, let me see her too. After the breakthrough of honest conversation, a new and complicated tension settled between us. It wasn't the easy warmth of shared moments anymore, but something fragile, charged with unspoken fears and doubts. The world outside seemed to press in harder, expectations, judgments, and the quiet voice inside me whispering, "Is this really possible?" And I could sense her wrestling with the same questions. There were days when she seemed distant, her usual calm replaced by a subtle restlessness. I noticed it in the way her fingers clenched around her coffee cup, the brief tightening of her jaw as if holding back words she wasn't ready to say. I could see the hesitation in her eyes, that careful weighing of every step forward or back. And though I longed to reach out, to bridge the growing space between us, I hesitated too, afraid that pushing too hard might break the fragile connection we'd built. The age between us wasn't just a number. It was a quiet barrier filled with invisible voices. What would others think? Was it right for me to want this? To be drawn to someone with such a different story, a different place in life? The answers weren't simple, and the uncertainty wrapped around my heart like a fog. I found myself retreating sometimes, caught in my own swirl of doubts. The memories of her smile would surface unexpectedly, warming me, but they were tangled with the fear of losing what was still so new and delicate. I catch myself watching her from a distance, wondering if she felt the same hesitation, the same fear of what this could mean. She wasn't immune to the inner struggle either. I saw the flicker of sadness when she thought I wasn't looking, the way she'd pull back slightly when I reached for her hand. It was a silent conversation of resistance and desire, two forces pulling us in opposite directions. Her strength was there, but so was the vulnerability beneath it, the fear of opening herself fully and being hurt. We both craved connection, but were haunted by the shadows of what might come. Judgment, misunderstanding, the possibility of heartbreak. The weight of those possibilities made every touch, every glance, feel like walking on a tightrope. One afternoon, I remember sitting across from her, the silence between us thick and uneasy. She looked away, her fingers nervously tracing the rim of her cup, and I realized that sometimes love isn't about grand declarations. Sometimes it's about sitting in the uncomfortable spaces, waiting for the courage to find us again. Despite the distance, there was still a quiet hope, a fragile thread holding us together. It was the knowledge that beneath the hesitation, beneath the doubt, there was something real and worth fighting for. We just needed time to untangle our fears and find the courage to step closer once more. After the tension of hesitation and unspoken fears, something gently shifted between us, not with loud words or dramatic confessions, but through the quiet language of care. It was in the small gestures, the tender moments where vulnerability no longer needed to be hidden behind walls. Our connection deepened not through declarations, but through subtle affection that spoke louder than words ever could. One morning, I found a book waiting for me on the windowsill of my apartment, a worn novel, carefully chosen, with a note tucked inside that read simply, "For when you need to escape." The gesture was quiet, almost shy, but it carried the weight of thoughtfulness and kindness. It was her way of reaching out without pressure, a gentle reminder that she was there, paying attention. In return, I began bringing her coffee whenever our paths crossed, even before she asked. I'd watch for the tiredness in her eyes, the way she'd rub her temples after a long day, and I'd want to offer a small comfort, something to say without words that I cared. The steam rising from the cup felt like a bridge, warm and real, connecting us in a moment of shared calm. Our touches became more frequent, but still careful, never rushed or forced. Her hand resting lightly on my shoulder as we passed each other in the hallway, grounding me in the present. The brush of her fingers against my arm as she reached for something nearby, a fleeting contact that sent warmth rippling through me. These moments were tender and deliberate, a silent conversation of affection where every touch lingered just long enough to say, "I'm here." There was an intimacy in the way we began to share space, sitting closer on a park bench, our shoulders brushing, the comfortable silence enveloping us like a cocoon. I noticed the softness in her eyes when she looked at me, a mix of reassurance and something deeper, something almost shy. It was as if we were both learning how to be near each other again, step by cautious step. One afternoon, she tucked a stray lock of hair behind my ear with a careful, gentle touch. The warmth of her fingertips against my skin sent a quiet thrill through me, a reminder that this wasn't just friendship, it was something more. But it was never rushed or overwhelming. Each gesture was a question, a hope, an invitation to lean in without fear. These quiet acts of care made the distance between us shrink, not just physically, but emotionally. They spoke of trust building slowly, bricks laid one by one in a fragile but growing foundation. There was no rush, no need to fill every silence with words. Sometimes the most powerful feelings are found in the smallest moments, those that show up without fanfare, simply because someone cares. In these subtle ways, we began to rewrite the story we'd both hesitated to tell. And with every gentle touch, every thoughtful gesture, I felt the walls between us come down just a little more. After all the quiet moments, the hesitant touches, and the unspoken questions hanging between us, the time finally came when the walls we had both built around our hearts began to crumble. The moment wasn't marked by grand gestures or dramatic declarations, but by a quiet, raw honesty that felt both terrifying and necessary. We found ourselves sitting together on a park bench under the soft glow of street lamps, the evening air cool but comforting. The world around us faded into the background, the distant hum of passing cars, the rustle of leaves overhead, but what mattered was the stillness between us. Her eyes held mine with an intensity one hadn't dared to hope for, a vulnerability that mirrored my own. "I don't want to pretend anymore," I said, my voice barely above a whisper. The words felt fragile, like they might shatter if I said them too loud. I've been holding back because I was scared of what this means, scared of what others might think. But the truth is, I can't stop thinking about you, about us. She reached out slowly, her fingers brushing the back of my hand, a touch both grounding and electrifying. "I felt it too," she admitted, her voice steady but soft, carrying the weight of years of guarded emotions. "This connection, it's more than I expected, more than I allowed myself to hope for." There was a pause, heavy and full of meaning. Her hand moved to gently trace the contours of my palm, and I felt a warmth spread through me, a quiet assurance that I wasn't alone in this. The distance between us disappeared in that moment, replaced by something tender and real. We spoke then, not just with words, but with the language of touch and gaze, her fingers lightly tracing circles on my skin, my heart pounding in time with hers. It was a dance of vulnerability, a shared admission that we were willing to risk everything for the chance to be together. "I never thought someone like you, someone with your experiences and your grace, would see me this way," I confessed, the honesty in my voice surprising even myself. "But you made me forget all the doubts I had. You made me believe that maybe, just maybe, this could work." Her smile was small, but filled with quiet strength. "You made me forget too," she said, her eyes shimmering with unshed tears. "Forget the years of caution and pain. Forget the loneliness. You brought me back to something I thought I'd lost." In that moment, the barriers of age and uncertainty melted away, replaced by a connection that was deeper than either of us had expected. It wasn't about the numbers or the opinions of others. It was about two souls finding each other against the odds in the quiet spaces between life's noise. As we sat there, hands entwined and hearts open, I realized this was more than just attraction. It was a beginning, a promise that whatever came next, we would face it together, honestly and without fear. The days that followed our confession were filled with a quiet, steady warmth, the kind that doesn't rush or demand but settles gently, like sunlight filtering through leaves on a calm afternoon. We were no longer two people caught in hesitation or doubt. We had crossed the invisible line into something real and tender, something that felt both fragile and unbreakable. There was no need for grand declarations or dramatic moments. Instead, our love grew in the small, everyday ways, moments that felt honest and true. We found comfort in sitting close, sharing space without the pressure of words. Her head would rest lightly against my shoulder, and I'd feel the steady beat of her heart, a soothing rhythm that made everything else fade away. Our hands often found each other, fingers interlacing with a familiarity that surprised me, like they had always belonged together, just waiting for this moment to be realized. The warmth of her skin under my fingertips, the softness of her touch, spoke volumes about the trust and affection we had built. It was a quiet intimacy, the kind that didn't need to be loud to be deeply felt. We talked more openly now, not just about our days, but about the future, tentative plans made with cautious hope. There were still moments of hesitation, of course, when the world's expectations crept in, but they no longer held the power to pull us apart. Instead, we faced them together, side by side, with a quiet strength born of understanding and respect. I saw her confidence blossom in new ways, no longer guarded by walls of hesitation, but softened by the knowledge that she was loved for exactly who she was. And in turn, I found myself growing into a man who could meet her gaze without fear or doubt, ready to embrace whatever came next with open arms and an open heart. The age difference, once a silent shadow between us, became just a part of our story, not the whole story. It was in the gentle teasing about our favorite music, the way she showed me old photographs from her life while I shared my dreams for the future. It was in the shared laughter and the comfortable silences, the moments when our hands brushed and lingered, saying everything words couldn't. One evening, as we watched the sun dip below the horizon, I felt her hand slip into mine, fingers tightening in a promise. Her eyes met mine with a quiet certainty that took my breath away. In that moment, I knew we had found something rare, a love that was patient, deep, and real. It wasn't perfect. Life rarely is, but it was ours, and that was enough. As we walked away from the fading light, side by side, I felt a peace I hadn't known before. The kind that comes from knowing you are seen, truly seen, and loved for all that you are. She had made me forget everything I thought I knew about her, about love, about myself. And in that forgetting, I found a new beginning. One I was ready to live, every quiet moment, every gentle touch, every heartbeat shared.